Hello, welcome to the Maya Tool Belt. My name is Michael McKinley. Today I thought I'd talk about history because my video series specifically teaches tools and commands as opposed to, say, here's how you make this really awesome character. What I do is I'm teaching you the tools. Like, here's how all these tools work so that you can then go out and make whatever you want. That's what I'm trying to do here. And because history is so important in how these tools work, how they function, and everything, that really early on I felt it should be very important that I talk about history, what it is, how it works. So to help with that, I have the outliner over here displayed. Now the outliner can be found under Window, Outliner. And what it generally is, in case you don't know, is just a list of everything in your scene. And right now these things that are listed here, these are the default just generic things that are in your scene. Anytime you create a new scene, there's the cameras, perspective, top, front, and side. And then there's these default light sets and such that whenever I make something like a cube, you can see that it's not completely black like this. It's actually got some sort of lighting and different tones based on camera angles and such. That's just the default lighting that comes with a Maya scene. So those things are listed here in the outliner, and we're going to ignore those except for pCube1, which I just made. So every time I make something or anything like that, you'll see it show up in the outliner over here. And that's going to be important when it comes to history, because history affects a lot about what happens over here in the outliner. Or I should say the things that happen in the outliner affect history. That's the good way to say it. So right off the bat, pCube1, I have a cube here. If I look over here in the channel box on the right, under inputs, I have polycube1. And if I click it, all my creation attributes show up. Width, height, depth, and if I can adjust all these things. Subdivisions, and so on. Now, if you make a cube in Maya and this is not here, you see no inputs at all, that's because, more than likely, because of this icon up here called Construction History On Off. By default it should be toggled on. But if by chance for somehow you hit the wrong key somewhere and turned it off, like this, and it shows a little red X, now if I make another cube, you'll see that I have no inputs over here, like this one has. This cube has history still, and I can still adjust it and everything. This cube, no inputs, no history. So in order to use history, you first have to have history turned on, which is what this button does. And like I said, by default, it should be on for you. I'll delete these, start from scratch. So one easy way to show history being made, I'll just simply create a cube, duplicate it. So now over here in the outliner, I got pCube1 and pCube2. Now I'm just going to do a simple combine under Mesh Combine. And what this does is it combines the two objects together to create one object. So if I click off in space, I deselect my cubes. If I click the one on the right, I've also selected the one on the left, because as far as Maya is concerned, this is one object now, fused together, even if they are physically separate. However, let's look in the outliner real quick. I have polysurface 1, which is a generic way of Maya naming something. That's a polygon, a polysurface 1. That's the new object that was created when I combined the two cubes. As far as our perception was, the two cubes were just combined together into one selectable thing. However, because history is turned on, you can see over under inputs, I have polycube1. That was my initial creation settings. And then I have a new thing called polyunite1. This is the history element associated with that combine command. It would be a lot simpler if they just called it polycombine1, but they don't. They call it polyunite1. And over here in the outliner, you can see I don't have just one thing, even though as far as selecting anything, I have one thing. But here you have these two things called p cube 1 and p cube 2. They're still named the original names of my two cubes. They're still listed in the outliner, and I can even still select them. If I select p cube 1, you'll see the pivot point of my selection is centered on the left cube. Same with the right when I select p cube 2. That's because there is history. If I select poly surface 1, I've got both objects selected, they're both highlighted. If I try to move it, it moves them as one, because, like I said, poly surface 1, this object is both these cubes together. Fused together, they're one object. But because history is still active, I can go back and select p cube 1, this history object over in the outliner, and I can move it separately still. Maya works really, really hard to make sure that you are always able to go back and change something after doing a command. It doesn't always work 100% of the time, but generally speaking, history allows you to go back in time and change anything you want. In this case, I can change, like, I don't want those two cubes positioned that way. I've already combined them. I don't want to have to undo. I don't have to. I can just go back to my outliner here, select p cube 1, the history object of this left cube, and move it over here closer to where I want it for some reason. So that's generally what history does in a nutshell. I mean, it can be a lot more complex than that, especially as we get into more complex commands and more complex maneuvers in Maya. You'll start looking over here in your outliner and just seeing all this little red arrow with the trapezoidal shape, these history objects, like I call them, just filling your outliner as you do things. And every now and then, you may need to delete the history. The main reasons why you would need to delete history would be, like I said, Maya works so hard to let you go back that sometimes it gets in the way. And when that happens, it's time to ditch the past and work toward the future by deleting your history. And the way you do that is going to Edit, Delete by Type, History. And that's kind of a convoluted way of getting there, so I always like to put a shortcut up here on my shelf for deleting history right here. The way you make a shelf shortcut, by the way, is when you find whatever you're looking for, in this case, delete history, Edit, Delete by Type, History, hold Control and Shift, and then click it. Click History. I'm not going to do it now because I've already got it. And you'll see an icon show up on your shelf for whatever you've selected. And it can be practically anything in all these menus you can make shelf shortcuts for. So, now I hadn't actually done it yet. Let me select my poly surface 1 and delete history. Nothing visually changes, but you can immediately see in the outliner those two history objects are gone. And over here, my inputs are gone. This object is essentially frozen in this time, at this point, and I can never go back, unless I undo, of course, I can never go back and change anything after deleting history and moving on. There's a couple reasons why history is so important, and not just for going back and changing things, but undoing things. Let me just delete all this stuff and just create a cube. Let's just do a cylinder over. Let's break things up. Let's say I want to make, like, I don't know, a goblet or something, some kind of ornate cup, and I'm going to do something really kindergarten looking. Nothing too complicated, just so I can get something on the screen and show you guys how this works. And I'm just going to do a couple extrudes, move that around, extrude this. Nothing fancy, really nothing to it. Okay, so in this particular case, in the outliner, there's nothing in the outliner that really affects anything. It's just P cylinder 1, which means polygon cylinder 1. There's nothing over here to select or change. Over here, however, over here in the channel box on the right side, under inputs, you can see I've got a list of things. Every single extrude I did shows up here in numerical fashion. The first one, extrude face 1, if I click it, tons of options for that one command. Extrude face 2, and so on. the same options as I go up the list. Over here on the far left in my toolbox here, where my move tool, rotate tool, scale tool, if you keep going down the list, you'll eventually get the show manipulator tool. If you click show manipulator, it will show you the manipulator for these history objects, these history commands in my input list. So let's say I've made this shape. I'm happy with it, but then my boss tells me, oh no, you didn't make it, the bottom of it down here needs to be thinner. That was my very first extrude. I got to go back and change it. Oh man, such a horrible thing. I've gotten so far into my project, I got to go back to the very first step and change it. But wait, I have history. I can go back to poly extrude face 1, the very first extrude I did, and I can still change it. Poly extrude face 5, which is this one up here. I can still move it. And all the changes that happen after it will take whatever changes I make now into effect. Like if I go back to poly extrude face 2 and move it now, I can still change this shape. I can still manipulate those past commands even though I've moved beyond them, because history keeps them here in the list for you. And that works for a lot of different commands, and that's an example of one that does not involve the outliner. So I feel like I'm just scratching the surface for his history. I'm going to call this history part 1. Eventually I'm sure I'll come back and do a history part 2, but I'm going to move on to other tools and such. But I really hope this helped. History is extremely powerful, and especially when you forget to delete it, or if you delete it by accident and you realize you miss it. But this has been Michael McKinley for the Maya Tool Belt. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you like and subscribe to this channel, I really appreciate it. And feel free to make a comment, so I'll try to respond. And thanks very much. I'll see you guys next time.